Our first guest is going to be Alex Jean-Baptiste. He currently serves as Global Head of City Investment Management and Trust Compliance. His experience spans multiple different industries, all centered around law. He graduated with a JD from Quinnipiac University School of Law, and he is a licensed New York attorney. For everyone here at our third annual Leadership Summit, please welcome to the stage Alex Jean-Baptiste.
Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I am very happy to be here with you all today. I want to thank the university for giving me the opportunity to speak with you. And also I want to thank Kamina from Human Option for reaching out to me. I can see the bishop is still in the room in the back as well. I want to thank him for his wonderful message of hope that he shared with us this morning. And one thing he said, hope does not disappoint, right? I'll take it a step further. I will say that hope is a waking dream. So don't be afraid to dream big. As an immigrant, right, I've had to dream big all my life, literally all my life, because there were times where I was dreaming of something where I didn't even have the plan yet, but I had to continue to dream, right? I couldn't stop dreaming. And that is a part of life. We all have to continue to dream every day, even when you cannot see the path forward. Sadly, unlike the bishop though, I didn't bring any prop. I didn't bring my shoes, so there's not gonna be any shoes for me to show you, right? What I can share with you today, on a serious note, is really my collection of life experiences. So I'll start with, I was born in Haiti, right? And I wanna share that with you, right? I moved to the US when I was very young. I was maybe about 9 years old. And when I moved to this country, as some of you might as well be immigrant that moved into the US, so you're probably familiar with this. I did not speak the language. I did not understand the culture. And sometimes I would say, I did not even have the ability to eat the food the first 2 weeks when I was in this country. I remember the first time I tried to have fast food. My dad took me to KFC and they handed me a plate of chicken and I'm sitting there, what is this? Chicken? They expect me to eat this? Why is it so white? Like I opened it and I'm like, oh my gosh, right? But now I can eat it very easily, right? But on a serious note, right? When I started school, it was very challenging because I was not able to communicate with my peers. I was really not able to communicate with some of the teachers, right? And I was dealing with some stereotypes as well that I was unaware of. Those were already pre-established in that environment. So the first couple of years was extremely challenging. But what I would say, what is important when you face challenges, right, is to have the ability to keep pushing forward. And by pushing forward, you will eventually overcome, right? I think within a few years of being in the US, what happened is that I became more comfortable with my transition over time. And during that time, specifically when I was in middle school, I decided that I wanted to become an attorney. And this was where I was sitting in a classroom, we were doing an exercise, and the exercise was to really talk about what would you like to be when you grow up. And I'm sure many of you have done this exercise at some point in your life. You've had a conversation with someone where that question was posed to you, right? So I answered, and I said, I would like to become an attorney. And some people in the room look at me as if, well, this is certainly an impossible dream. Why would you think that? You've only been in this country for a few years, right? You will certainly not be able to achieve this, right? However, at the time, even at a young age, I knew what I wanted, and I believed in myself. The first thing that you have to do, no matter what your dream is, right? First, you need to make sure that it is truly what you want to do. Second, you need to believe in yourself before anybody else. Because other people will have doubts. Other people will question your ability to achieve your goals. And this happens at every age. It doesn't matter if you are in elementary, if you are in middle school, if you are in high school, if you're in college, if you're an adult today, there are things that you want to do, I want to do as an adult. And when I tell other people, they have doubts, right? So you need to be able to believe in yourself. That's the first step. Now, I decided I wanted to become a lawyer, right? Well, how do I do that, right? It's not just talking about it, right? Because you can talk about an idea, but you have to figure out how will you implement it. And the first thing I did, I spoke with my mom, and I told her about this. She was actually the one other person who believed in me, who believed in this dream, other than myself. And I told her that I want to go to a pre-law high school out of my district entirely. And that's a challenging process because you have to apply into a program, and then you have to get accepted into the program, right? And it's also out of my district. Therefore, my option is to take a bus to get to that school that will take over an hour each way. Or my mom can drop me, right? So when I apply, initially, I was actually waitlisted. So when I apply, I was waitlisted. I'm sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, this is a lot more challenging than I thought it would be, right? I applied a few months in advance. That's part of the process. Once I got waitlisted, I spoke with my mom again. I said, can you drive me to that school? I want to go there in person. I want to speak to the person who's actually in charge of the program, have a conversation with them. Because sometimes all people can see is a piece of paper. They see an application, right? But if you go there, you have a conversation, you have a dialogue, right? They have a real connection with you. They can understand why you're pursuing this dream, right? And they'll have, essentially what happened at that time, once I had the conversation with this person, he said, okay, I understand. Let me look at your application again, right? So again, weeks pass by, I'm sitting at home waiting for this, and the anxiety of, am I gonna go to this high school? Am I gonna go to a different high school? So that's also very challenging because I can't make any plans. Fortunately for me, after a few weeks, I received a letter in the mail that says a spot was open and I got accepted. And you couldn't imagine how happy I was at the time. I was so happy to hear this news, extremely happy. This is a school where I would say the student body was predominantly made of people who look like me, right? So that was also wonderful. Once I started school, the school also had a program where you can take advanced placement courses as part of the pre-law program that will provide you with college credit. So one thing that I did is I took the opportunity to take all of those courses. And the reason why this is important, at least for me, the reason I did it is, as an immigrant, my family, we were not rich. So when I heard about, free college courses, sign me up. I'm sorry, I don't have to pay for this stuff? Okay, great. Sign me up for all of them. I'm gonna study, I'm gonna do this. Great, right? Now, I also have to be honest with you. I took probably maybe during my entire year in high school, maybe 10 to 12 advanced placement classes. And yes, you do have to take a test with the College Board, right? I didn't pass all those tests. I can't say that I passed all 12, right? I wouldn't stand up here and lie to you and say, oh yeah, I passed every single one of those tests. But what's important is that I give it my best shot. I took every single one of those classes. And yes, I probably passed maybe 8 out of the 12 that I took, right? But as I say, what's important is that I took that step. Now, the funniest thing is going to college. No one in my family had ever gone to college, okay? No one even visited a college campus. Not a single soul, okay? I had never been on a college campus myself, right? So I started talking to my parents about going to college. And one thing that I knew then is that I only had 2 options for colleges. I knew that then. Here is the reason why. Some of you have very strict parents, so you probably know what I'm talking about. And also, given the fact that no one in my family had ever been to college, my parents wanted me to go somewhere that's close. So I knew that in advance. They also wanted well, how are we going to pay for this, right? So I said, oh, don't worry about this. I graduated in the top 11% of my high school class. You don't have to worry about paying for college. You just have to allow me to go. That's the only thing that you have to worry about. They said, okay. So as a result, I only applied to 2 schools, even though I graduated in the top 11%, because I knew that the only way I could go is to be within 2 hours from home, no more than 2 hours from home. So my parents agreed. I applied to college. I attended Florida International University. When I was in college, I decided that I wanted to triple major because I'm a complete overachiever. If you haven't noticed by now, I'm a total overachiever. So I graduated college with 2 bachelors, actually, instead of 1. I triple major graduated with 2. After college, I said, okay, it's time to achieve that big dream that I talk about at the beginning, to become a lawyer. Now, this is where things get really interesting. If you recall, I said I could only go to a school that's about 2 hours from my house. Now, I want to go to law school in Connecticut. I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. My parents have never been outside of Florida at the time. They have no idea where Connecticut is, okay? Even if I pointed to them on a map, they'll probably be like, what is Connecticut? No clue what Connecticut is. So I started having conversations, and I said, listen, I've applied to 5 law schools, okay? And I've received scholarships for all 5. And I want to go to this school. What do you think? And my mom, she's always on board, I have to admit. She's the first person to say yes, okay? My dad, he said, what is Connecticut? I've never heard of Connecticut. What are you talking about? You want to go to Connecticut? Is that a place that I can drive to in Florida? I'm like, no, Dad, it's 3.5-hour flight. He's like, 3.5-hour flight? What do you mean? So I came to Connecticut for the first time, right? And at the time I came during the summer, right? It was beautiful. I went to the campus, which is Quinnipiac University in Hamden, Connecticut. It was gorgeous. And I knew from then that I wanted to go there, but not only because the campus was beautiful, but because it's a very small law school. And therefore, you get to have a lot of one-on-one interaction with the professors. So I knew then that it was the right decision, right? Then I went back home, right? I confirmed with my parents that this is a school that I want to go to, so on and so forth. It took them a little bit of time to finally agree. And they said, yes, you can go to the school. However, at the end of every semester, we want you to come home, right? We want you to come home. We want you to call us regularly. That's the only way that you can be 3.5 hours away. I said, okay, that's fine. I can do that. That's not an issue. Gonna make it work. Now, as I was getting ready to start law school, one of the things about Quinnipiac is that they don't have housing for law students, so you need to find your own housing. I went back to Connecticut to find housing. As I was in Connecticut, within maybe 2 days, I received a call that my grandmother passed away. So I had to go back to Florida. I went back to Florida. The entire family has to focus on this. It's obviously a very sad moment. The last thing I'm thinking about is law school, if I'm being completely honest with you. Now, school will start in a couple weeks. I still don't have housing. It's like, well, you got accepted, you got a scholarship that's gonna pay for school, but you don't have a place to stay. So then I started looking. There was a forum, right, that the school created for all incoming law school students. I started looking through that to see if there were anyone if there was anyone else in the same situation looking for housing. And lucky for me, there were actually two people. And I will not give you their last name, but I will tell you their first name. Their names were Frank and John. So I met Frank and John online, and I said I was looking for housing. And they said, actually, we just signed a lease for a three-bedroom apartment. I said, okay, I can be the third roommate. Frank and John actually agreed to let me be their third roommate before they met me. They had already paid for first month deposit and last month. Like, when I think back on this, I'm like, wow. It was almost impossible for me to go to law school. Literally almost impossible. But as I say in life, you will experience challenges. Some of those challenges might be where people will doubt you. People will tell you your dreams are not possible. But also, there are strangers that you have never met who will support you in ways that your own friends and family may not. And that's what happened with Frank and John, at least for me, right? And till this day, we are friends. When I started law school, the very first day of orientation, I had a negative experience with someone else, right? It was challenging because that person made a comment, and many of you are familiar with this. The comment was, well, you're only here because of affirmative action, right? And I can laugh about it today. I can tell you at the time, I did not laugh, right? I also didn't get really upset, but I didn't enjoy receiving that comment, right? But what I can tell you is that before the first semester ended, that person wanted to be in my study group. It was that same person. What I can also tell you that might surprise you is that I became friends with that person. Yes, we got to know each other better. I'm not saying that I completely changed him. I'm not saying that I, made him a different person, right? But I think as we got to know each other, right, he understood who I was. I understood him better. We actually had many things in common. We did. And why am I placing emphasis on that? There are times people may say negative things, right? Some of those things may impact you, right? Again, as I said in the beginning, you have to believe in yourself, right? You have to believe in your dream first. But also, just because someone make one negative comment, right, doesn't mean you should avoid that person forever. It doesn't, I'm telling you. It doesn't. Maybe because it's of a misunderstanding. Maybe because of, sadly, of how they were raised. They were not exposed to certain things, right? So I think it's important as well to give people a second chance. Because people have given me, personally, a second chance, right? Because I would not stand up here and tell you that everything that I've ever taken on, I've done it well the first time. Absolutely not, right? We all need a second chance. So it's important for you to give other people a second chance. Now, the 3 years in law school was very challenging. It was extremely, extremely challenging because I had no family in Connecticut. So I had to create a family, right? So I started attending a church, right? I started going to all these other small events when I had time just to sort of meet people, right? And try to build a family. Because if something happened to you, your family is 3.5 hours away, yes, you can call them, but it's gonna take them a little while to show up, right? So you need to have a small village. You do need to have a small village. And it doesn't need to be 10, 20 people. It could be 2 people, it could be 3 people. But you need that support. And I believe it's truly important. Now, after I graduated law school, I was of the mindset that at that time, I was truly, truly confident because of everything else that I just told you. Because I was able to persevere through moving to the US. I was able to persevere and find my ways to get into law school. So now that I'm done with it, I told myself that I would only study for the bar once. I did. I set a goal. I said, I will only study for this test once. I will not study for the same test again. If I'm studying for this test again, it better be for another state. It's not going to be for this one. No, I kid you not. For 10 weeks straight, all I did for 10 weeks, I slept, I studied, I ate, and I repeated that process for 10 weeks. Now, some of you, at least some of the adults, you are familiar with this. The New York bar at the time was the second hardest bar in the country, after California, of course. This is a 2-day test, 8 hours per day. 4 hours, lunch, another 4 hours, right? So I went in, as I said, with the mindset that I'm going to take this test, and I'm going to pass it the first time. So I went in, took the test, the first 4 hours. What tends to happen when you come out, people will start speculating. So you have to just, don't even talk to anyone. Don't even say a word. And this is not just applicable to this test, any test for that matter, because that will impact your confidence. So don't even say a word, right? People will say, what do you think? What was this question? I don't want to hear it. I'm just here to eat lunch because I'm hungry. And then after lunch, I go in, take the other half, and repeat that cycle. I took my test in Buffalo. You're probably wondering, why are you taking a test in Buffalo? At the time, I was living in Connecticut. They prioritized New York City for New York residents. I had to register all the way in Buffalo. I had never been to Buffalo before that. It was an interesting experience, taking that test. It was challenging. After the test, I flew straight home to Florida. The next day, I got a call because I had actually already got a job. I got a call from I got a call where I was told that they no longer needed my services. Yes, I was told that we actually no longer need this headcount because we're having some budget cuts, right? I was expecting to start working at the beginning of October, right? So now I have to find another job, right? See, I just went over this milestone that I've been dreaming of my entire life, and I'm like, yeah, I'm so happy. I'm done with this. Now I can just sit, relax, and wait for the result. And then I got bad news the next day, right? Now I could literally go back into my room and crawl and cry and be unhappy, right? But sometimes things happen in life for a reason, right? Maybe if I started that job, I wouldn't be on the path that I am today. So of course, like I always do, I got up, started looking for new employment, which led me to exactly where I am today. I guess what I want you to learn from everything that I'm sharing with you is that your path might be difficult, there might be challenges, but you're not alone in your journey because there are people like myself and many others who have done it, and you can do it too. You can, and you will. And I would also go on to say that every single person who is a first-generation graduate have made history. Because their path, what they have done, their experience have created a path for someone else.
Thank you for talking. I had a question. You talked a lot about being on a difficult path or facing denial. How did you rise to adversity when it comes to like rejection and things of that matter? Because I need to work on myself. So how did you get better with dealing with rejection?
I think rejection, sadly, is a part of life. Let me start by saying that, right? As I said before, you're not going to be successful at every single thing that you do, right? If you get rejected, right, you have to remember why you wanted to do this in the first place, right? You have to go back to that and say, why did I want to pursue this in the first place? What is my motivation, right? By reminding yourself of your motivation, that is what will keep you going. Because if you don't remember what your motivation is, right, you're not going to be able to continue on the path. Right? As I said before, for me personally, there were many times where I felt like, oh my God, this is overwhelming, right? Also, because no one in my family had taken this path before, so it was also very challenging for me to go to them and say, well, can you advise me on what I should do next? Because they might not know, right? So first thing I did was, why did I want to do this in the first place? Right? Why did I want to go to law school? Right? I went back to that and I figured out what that is. And then I said, okay, although my parents cannot help me, what other resources are around me that I can use? Right? And those resources may be people here in this university. Those resources could be someone in your community, right? You just need to identify what that is, right? And to be able to lean on those resources, right? And to be able to ask for advice, to be able to ask for guidance. Because sometimes you might get rejected and you don't necessarily know what the next step is. There are times when you will know what the next step is, but there may be some times where you really don't know what that step is. And you need to talk to someone who's more experienced than you and say, hey, I've experienced this, right? And here is what it is. What are your thoughts? Any other questions?
Hello, thank you so much. It's very inspiring. Especially for first generation immigrant families, and anyone, any student, where, in regards to resilience, where can students, people, adults, like myself, find good mentors? What was your experience? You mentioned resources, you mentioned this college, you mentioned your pathway. What was your experience in finding
Sure.
mentors?
Sure. So I'm going to go back in time to answer your question. So remember, as I mentioned, I decided I wanted to go to law school when I was in middle school, right? And I also mentioned that I went to a pre-law high school, right? In order to even apply to go to the pre-law high school, I needed guidance, right? My mom, yes, she was there to support me, but I needed someone who understood the process. And certainly that person was not my mom, right? But she was there to give me emotional support. The person who actually helped me in that process was a guidance counselor, right? And I'm using that as an example because that guidance counselor was my resource. That was the person that I could speak with and say, listen, here's what I want to do. However, I have some thoughts on how to get there. Can you help me? Because I don't know the entire process. I don't know anyone who has ever done this. Can you help me with this? And that was not just the only time that I experienced that. When I wanted to go to college, right? I needed to speak with people who have gone through that process and say, what did you do, right? When I was drafting, my college letter, right? I drafted, but also I asked people, well, can you read it for me? Can you proofread it? What are your thoughts? It's my story. However, I'm saying, can you take a look at it? Do you have any suggestion, right? I didn't ask them, can you write it on my behalf, right? Obviously not. But the point is, there are people that you can find that you can lean on, right? Whether, as I mentioned, whether that is a guidance counselor, right? And at times, it could be someone in the community, someone that you know. It could be a friend of the family, right? Anyone who has gone through the process, right? And you said, hey, do you have a minute, right? Can I talk to you, right? And I also want you to know, by the way, the answer to that question may not always be yes, right? Because we live in a real world. There are times you might reach out to somebody and they said, no, they're not available, right? Again, you don't give up, you reach out to the next resource, right? That's really what you can do. You can keep going forward, keep pushing forward no matter what the situation. Any other questions?
I have a question. As you said, you were an overachiever, mentioning that 12 AP courses during your high school career. And I know as a lawyer and during law school, it takes much of your time. How do you balance this in between your classes, your studies, and in between things that you like to do personally and with your family?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, though. So, you know how we hear this phrase a lot, work-life balance? It's true, yes. Now, I'm going to tell you, the first year of law school, there's no work-life balance. There's school life. I have to be honest, there's no work-life balance the first year of law school. There was school life, okay? Like back then, if you needed to find me, you'll find me in the library. That's where I lived. I have to tell you the truth about that piece, right? And the reason why I'm sharing this with you, there are times when you have to make sacrifices, right? And no, I'm not saying that you should live your entire life where there is no balance. Absolutely not, because that is not healthy, right? You need time for yourself, you need time for your family, right? Because those things are always important, right? As a matter of fact, remember when I talk about motivation, right? Your motivation could be your family, right? In my case, it certainly was one of my motivations, right? My family. So even though during the first year of law school, yes, you'll find me in the library, but yes, I made time for my family. I made time to speak with them, right? And I still made time to be able to, okay, well, I'm gonna have lunch with this person, right? I might have dinner with this person. But I knew what the goal was, right? The goal, right, is to go to law school and pass. The goal is to go to law school and graduate. For doing that first year, right? Yes, the majority of my time was focused on that, but I still made some time for family. I still made some time on the weekend to spend times with friends, right? Because in order to have a healthy life, you still need to do some things outside of work, outside of school, right? There may be a period where you are heavily focused because there's a short-term goal that you want to achieve, but it's important to have work-life balance. Any other questions? Go ahead.
By the way, your story was incredible. So as someone who is LSAT prepping, and I also have an LSAT prep with the Free Law Club, is it possible to share your LSAT score? And if so, is there any advice that you give to someone when thinking about what law they would like to pursue?
Sure. So the first part of the question, and I would share it if I remember what it was. I'm being honest with you. And also, I'm going to take it a step further. I don't even remember my MBE score from the bar exam. The reason for that is after you pass these things, this was 10 years ago when I took the bar exam, right? After you pass these things, yes, it's definitely critical for the things that you want to achieve, right? But it's not like I'm sitting there saying, what was my score? And I carry that score with me every day. I wish, right? Now, I'm happy to go back and find it and share it with you, but I do not know what it is today. I cannot recall exactly what it is. As far as studying for the LSAT, I think you need to figure out, which portion of the test that you're really good at and say, okay, I'm going to look at that. However, this is not where I need to focus. I need to focus on the area where I have weaknesses, right? I need to figure out what that is. And for me, I recall when I was preparing for it, the section where I was extremely good, logic games. That was me. Give me the logic games. If the test was all logic games, I probably would have had a perfect score. Logic games, that was for me, right? But I also knew there were other areas of the test where I had some weaknesses, and I needed to focus on that. One last thing that I will mention about the LSAT. It's not something that you will take once. Most people actually take it at least twice. Because unless you take it the first time and you have an extremely high score, you're going to take it a second time to say, well, you know what, let's see if I can push this score a little bit more.